to a Raptors Republic podcast. We're calling it the Wrap Up Live Summer Edition because not all of the wrap up people are here. And this isn't really a wrap up, it's just an excuse because me and Adon wanted to talk basketball. And so we have the banner, we got the theme, so we're going with the wrap up. But yeah, I'm Oren, joined by Adon, and today we wanted to talk a little bit about, everybody's talking about the playoffs, everybody's talking about the Raptors. It's too passe. We've heard it all before. Adon wanted to talk about the dire state of the NBA in his mind. No, we want to talk a little bit about where the NBA as a whole is at right now, where we think it's going, how we think the league is doing, how we think it's growing, and some of the rule changes as well that they're trying to put into place for next season and what we think about those, and just kind of talk about the league as a whole, because I think we both find it interesting, and some of the projection stuff and what have you. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Adon to give us his piece and his background and strategic foresight and talk about where he thinks the NBA is going. And then I will probably disagree and I will rebut and we'll go from there.
Yeah, to preface, this isn't a fully rounded out thesis yet, but it's a work in progress. And the
And to
context
preface, I have no idea what he's going to say.
Yeah, that too. I mean, the context is that like I do a lot of work in quote unquote future studies. So like not predicting the future necessarily, but looking at kind of indicators of change, things that suggest that something might be happening that could cause the future to occur. So with the NBA, like it's something I've really been thinking a lot about, and it stems from the conversations we are constantly having, at least on Twitter and like with punditry, about the quality of the game, right? Is there too much offense? Is there not enough defense? Are charges bad for the game? All of these kinds of things. And I have opinions on all of them. But from a bird's eye view, I think the NBA is headed for a little bit of a crisis and almost kind of like a bubble of sorts. And the reasoning is this, and bear with me, but basically, you have the game divided into three parts, or the NBA. You have gameplay, like the actual players playing the game. You have consumption, so how the NBA is consumed, whether that's by like watching it, reading about it, listening to these podcasts, and then you have
Social
the profit.
media.
What's that?
Social media.
Right, exactly. And then you have the profits, how the money is made and keeps the organization running, blah, blah, blah. So my issue is that I think there's a dissonance between the gameplay, the consumption, and the profits, right? So the majority of the profits made in the NBA is through TV deal, right? And like I would say like ad revenue, and then some kind of merchandising, and then tickets in the stadium. The majority of the consumption used to be, or still might be, but I think is declining on cable TV, right? But what is, and I would attribute most of that to generation. Like if you divide it by demographics and generations, the boomers for sure, the millennials to some degree. But then as you go to the next generation and even the millennials, the consumption is changing. It's not watching it on cable TV. I don't have cable. I know a lot of my friends don't. We're either pirating the stream, or I think a lot of people are just watching the NBA through highlights and highlight packages, right? And like you hear about this with children, like watching on Snapchat or Instagram, whatever. So they're not tuning into the games. And there's a lot of reasons why they're not tuning into the games, and we can get into that. I think the quality of the entertainment is going down. I think the game is too slow and too long. And it's also in stadium is now inaccessible, right? So the inaccessibility of cable, because we don't purchase cable, but also you can't afford to go to the games. And when you do, you're not necessarily seeing the best product on the floor. So what I want to know is, at what point will the TV and streaming deals that they're paying billions of dollars for, the next one is going to apparently be 3 or 4 times what the last one was. When will that disconnect occur, where the majority of people are consuming the game not through streaming or cable, but through these highlight packages or third or second party experiences, to the point that these cable companies or these streaming companies or the companies using the advertisement streams are questioning the value that they're paying for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, a lot of interesting points there. I just pulled this up to your point. That I feel like this season was like amazing, just objectively from a parody standpoint and everything. And yet viewership was down in America from last season, which was like a COVID ravaged season. So I just wrote a story about something around this and basically like learned that all sports TV ratings are going down, as you kind of explained. That's just it's not so much that sports are slow or anything. It's just that people have different ways of consuming media, and the new generations have a shorter attention span, and they watch highlights, they watch TikTok. So sports as a whole are going down, but out of all the sports, basketball is like doing way better than the other ones. Like the NBA is not falling off the cliff that baseball and hockey are, for example, in terms of like the NBA and the NFL are doing relatively well.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like you're right. It's interesting to me that everyone just assumes that all these TV deals are going to explode, and yet at the same time we all know that TV ratings as a whole are going down.
Right.
What I think the TV companies and the advertising companies say is that like there are so many other ways to leverage the popularity of the league beside getting people to tune into TV. And that's why I think the NBA is doing so well, cuz like you have so many stars who are really marketable and really good characters and all that stuff, and there's just so many ways to leverage their popularity other than people watching full games on cable. And
But I think that's the problem, right? Is that could we reach and the NBA did basically a deal with the devil, right? Which was genius at the time, which was, let's market the league not solely on the entertainment on the floor, but through the personas of the players, like Michael Jordan did, and beyond, but then also through the melodrama of the offseason, the speculation of transactions, like the relationships between players, and like all of it, right? All of this, they call the NBA now almost like a 24/7 reality show in a lot of ways. There's always something popping, and you can be entertained without even watching the game. Like, like I have a lot of friends who kind of know what are going on, but don't watch any of the games. and
yeah,
and I feel like the melodrama is unpredictable. You can't manufacture that, right? It happens, it doesn't happen. And and I think that's like that could be and it's an unprofitable source, right? Like the idea is that the melodrama draws people to, like, their idea essentially was, let's market the players, let's market the non on court entertainment, and that will bring viewership to the on court entertainment. At least that's the way I understand it. And I don't think that's actually true. What I think's happening is you're getting a lot of people that realize they can enjoy the game through a combination of Twitter, highlight packages, Woj bombs, and then tune into like the odd important game or the odd matchup. But for the majority of the 82 game season, no one cares.
yeah. I think you're right. I don't think that it draws people to the games the way they would like it to, but I still think that there is ways, like it's not as clear of a direct profit of as getting people to just watch cable, but I just think there is always going to be ways, if people are paying attention to the NBA, whether it's on social media, whether it's through highlights, like there's just always going to be ways to make money if your league is popular with young people. Like NBA Top Shop, like think about that example. Like there is just the
Is that
league,
even doing well?
but the point is like the league might get to a point where it's like, okay, we need other revenue streams beside the TV deals.
Yes.
And if they do, I just feel like they could find them with NBA Top Shot just being a random example of like how to leverage the popularity of the league with people who don't actually watch the games. And that's just one example that didn't even work out very well, but like I feel like they could get creative enough to have a whole host of examples.
I would just be curious to know what the like how the demographics divide out on like viewership and consumption, because and now going into a little bit of the weeds, like one of the problems is ticket prices, right? In a lot of places, not all.
Mm-hmm.
And in combination with that, the fact that players aren't playing, and what I call not load management, but skill management, which is like we saw this year for the first time, maybe not the first time, Jokic and Butler kind of like putter around for a month or two, right? And then ramp it up come playoff time, which is like this kind of similar phenomenon to load management, but it's essentially sending a message to the NBA and fans that the season's not that important. Like we
Yeah.
can get away with playing 3/4 of a season and still get to the playoffs, be an 8th seed or a 1 seed or a 9 seed in Miami's case, and a 7 seed, I guess, the Lakers, and ramp it up and compete at a high level. So if the majority of the people consuming the game right now are older people, I just wonder when those people move on and like it's our generation and younger, like what
Mm.
is going to be the attraction to the game itself other than the off-court stuff, which I think is really cool. Like the dunks, the blocks, the playmaking, like all of that. But you can consume that in 8 minutes. So why the fuck would I go watch a game? You know? And I think,
Yeah.
and I don't know that they're going to be able to leverage the revenue that they need when streaming and TV are like, why are we paying for these 3-hour games when viewership is way down?
Yeah, okay, there's a lot to go up. I feel like the TV deals though aren't just they're not only buying the game, right? Like TNT, like they buy like the halftime show, they buy the pregame shows, the Stephen A on ESPN, and like NBA Countdown. Those shows I would bet are more popular than ever because it speaks to the whole drama aspect of the league. So that's a way where the drama actually is revenue generator because like people pay more attention to those shows now because I feel like the NBA is always some crazy shit going on and you want to see what Stephen A. Smith has to say about Kyrie Irving believing that the devil is in his backyard, like people just want to see this. So I I want to get into the part about how we frame the game because I do think we've gone too far into like only talking about the drama and the Chris Mannix. I want to bring the Chris Mannix suite. Before I do though, you just made me think about something and here's my theory. It's off topic. We're gonna take a quick side route,
Bring
but
it. Let's
we'll
do
get
it.
back to it. Let me think what you think because I also think the load management is a huge problem. Feels like I mean the 8th seed is about to go to the NBA Finals. It feels like the regular
I don't
season
know.
doesn't matter
I
as
don't know
much.
about that.
Not to say like Miami's regular season, I really think they did try important stuff in the regular season, but at the same time, whatever, the load management stuff, huge problem. And then I think here's my theory on the LeBron James cryptic retirement note. He's not retiring, obviously. I don't think he's taking a year off to play with his son a year from now. What I think LeBron wants to do and might do next season is like just be like, I'm 40 years old. I'm not playing 82 games. The first couple months of the season, I'm fucking off. I'm recovering from a foot surgery. I'm not going to be with the team. Like that's just this is going off just my random like theory. And I think that message was a message to the Lakers to like build up this team so that in the regular season I don't have to be a guy who plays like 80 games and like gets us to the playoffs like which happened this year. Like get a good supporting cast in guys that can carry us to the playoffs and I will be ready for the playoffs, but I'm not going to be ready start of the season. And so if that happens, I was just thinking like that would basically be the next level of load management and the next level of like player empowerment that we've never seen before. But doesn't it feel like that's where the league is going? Like, you have Kawhi leveraging all his power to not play back-to-backs. You've had all this stuff, and it feels to me like the natural next step is guys are just going to be like, I'll play some of the season, but not the whole season.
Yeah, I'm gonna refrain from touching the LeBron stuff unless we really want to go into that, because I have a strong dislike for how LeBron operates.
Okay.
But I do think you're right. I think that's the way the league's going. And if you look at a player's life cycle, or to some degree a team's life cycle, but particularly a player, it's, get into the league, big accomplishment. Earn your like stripes, right? Like through fame, success, whatever that looks like. Get paid. Get that second contract. And then depending on the motivations of some players, getting paid is enough and sustaining that payment is enough. Some players want to win, right? And then there's this kind of like core part of your career where you are trying to become the best player you can, either to get paid again or to win. And what you see with a lot of teams and players is that once they've proven that they can win at the highest level, as far as like the regular season goes, and they know that it's kind of at the bare minimum they're going to make the playoffs, that's kind of where there's a plateau in, I think, what we see as far as like effort and effort and how
Yeah.
hard they play, right?
Yeah.
And like a good example is Utah, where we saw every year Utah just like cracking heads every single game, and then going into the playoffs as the one seed, even the Raptors to some degree, and then just sucking, right? So like the algorithm for winning a championship is not destroy in the regular season. It's like, make sure you're a good team, you've got everything in alignment, and then bide your time until you're in the playoffs. And we saw that this year with the Suns, the Warriors, the Lakers, the Heat.
I think it's a competitive edge, right? Is like, if you're well rested going into the playoffs because you didn't go that hard in the regular season, you have a competitive edge on the teams that did go hard. And I think Joel Embiid's a great example of like a guy who, I mean, his injury is random and you can't really know all of this,
Well,
but
he gassed
he
too.
went hard for the MVP 3 years in a row, and he made it very clear that he went hard for, especially this year. Whereas Jokic literally stopped trying for like the last month of the season, and then you see it. Jokic has a little more juice in the playoffs, and Embiid just didn't. He ran out of whatever. It might have been the injury, but he just wasn't good. So I definitely think there's something to that competitive edge which guys are trying to get by not playing as much in the regular
Yeah.
season, and the NBA just allows it. Like, they don't have
Well,
nearly strict enough rules to deter it.
and that's
It's
the
like,
problem.
you're gonna like fine me $10,000. That's a penny.
Well, and you can see the NBA's conflict of interest, right? Because on the one hand, they they need to change the rules so teams and players aren't incentivized to avoid playing the game, right? And I don't blame any player who takes off 25% of his season. Like, their
Yeah.
health is their moneymaker. Why would they chance it for a couple of games in March in Charlotte, right? Like, who
Yeah.
cares?
Yeah.
So it's the league's responsibility to incentivize playing at your maximum all of the time. At the same time, the NBA's a profiteering corporation that is responsible to shareholders, and they're not interested in decreasing short-term revenue gain for long-term success of the value, which is a part of my larger thesis that, they're kind of what I don't know what the phrase would be, like spiting the nose or spiting the face for the nose, whatever it is. I don't know. But they're basically
Spit in the
thinking
face, so they yeah.
spiting the nose or the face. I don't know.
Spit
Anyway,
in my
it's short
face
term
and you
thinking is all
spit
I'm
in my
saying.
mouth.
If they had a third party like rule regulator that could like figure out how to optimize the entertainment value of the game, there would be a sea change of changes of rule changes, but they don't, because they're conflicted by they want to make money.
Sure, but I mean, that would never work. And that just reminded me, though, to the NBA's credit. So I just wrote this big story about hockey and how
Ugh.
the NHL refuses to send their players to the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Because they are so focused on short-term gains, and they're like, February, that's our biggest month. All the eyeballs are on us. Other sports are done. We're not going to take a break to go to the Olympics. That's been their stance for the last 8 years. And the NHL is really struggling. But like when I did research for the piece, I was like, okay, do all leagues have these short-term ideas that hurt their long-term growth? And like you look at the NBA, and I actually think in terms of their global approach, they were very forward focused.
For
And they were
sure.
like, even the dream team, they were just like so willing to like imagine if Michael Jordan got hurt for Team USA, right? Like that would have screwed the NBA, but they took that risk to grow the game globally. Same with opening offices in Africa and China in like the early 2000s. They took those risks and they've paid off massively, 20 years later. So I do give credit to the NBA where it's due, just because they've been more willing than other leagues to sacrifice some short-term risks or profits for long-term gains. And that's part of this too, if we're talking about why the NBA is, in a good position, in my opinion, is because it's like such a global game. We're talking about TV ratings in America.
Yeah,
I would venture to bet that in Africa, in China, like more and more people are watching NBA games than ever before.
that's true.
So I think that's a big deal. But I wanted to get back to this unless you have like something on the topic. But
Well, I just
yeah.
wanted to say quickly on that part, like, I think soccer is a good example of them like having this kind of like global perspective as well. I also think that expansionism is like par for the course with like a corporation too, right? It's just like bigger, 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 wider, 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 and like gross revenue will overcome whatever fallibilities you have in your product, and I think at some point that could like come home to roost. That's kind of my argument, but I do agree that expanding into the Chinese and African markets has been a brilliant play that the others like that the other three sports would die to do, and they did not and they didn't set themselves up to do it, which is again to the credit of the NBA, like promoting the individual over the team, for example.
For
But that
sure.
also has consequences too, with now we're in an era where we're player fans more than we are team fans. But anyway, sorry I cut you off.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna go back to the point about like we're talking about, okay, the NBA has a problem where it's popular on social media and we talk about the drama of it, but people don't watch the games as much.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has to do with the media and how we promote the game and how we, right? So like obviously this Chris Mannix from Sports Illustrated tweet, not to pile on the guy because wow, he's been
He got
piled on 10
capital
million
R roasted.
10 million views on this one tweet, which has, this many quote tweets or whatever. Because he basically just said, like, the reason that nobody's talking about the Denver Nuggets, which Michael Malone has been, like, on the media about, like, he's on a crusade to get people to talk about his team. And Mannix just said the reason is, like, they are boring. He said they're not a compelling team to write about. And then he said, the Lakers, they have so much drama. The Warriors, they have so much dysfunction. And the Nuggets don't have that. And I listened to that and I was just like, isn't that exactly the opposite of what we like? Why is dysfunction rewarded? Why is drama rewarded? Because that's what he's saying. He's like, it's fun, it's the media's job to talk about the dysfunctional and the dramatic teams. And it's like, so you're telling me those teams are being rewarded by being dysfunctional in the sense that they have all the eyeballs on them and they're getting all the marketing from the league or the media related to the league because Draymond punched Jordan Poole in the face? Like, that's a good thing? That's what bothered me about his thing. It's like, no, we should be celebrating the Denver Nuggets of the world who treat basketball as like a profession. They're professional about it, and they treat like the on-court product is their be all end all. They just don't have off-court shit that they leak to the media. Like everything about the Nuggets is about what they're doing on the court, and like that is the stuff we should be talking about. But to be frank, like it's harder to talk about that. That's part of it. It's harder to talk X's and O's than it is to talk about like Jordan Poole getting punched in the face. So I think that's part of it. But I do think this is a big problem where I'm not worried like you are, but I will say that the direction it's going, where the media is so concerned about the drama and not concerned about promoting the actual basketball, that worries me.
Yeah, and like I was saying, I'm looking for weak signals. I'm looking for little things to suggest if there's enough of these little things, there's a growing bigger trend coming. And this is one of them, is that like mainstream NBA media is very bad. It's empty calories. It's just so unrelatable in so many ways, other than the fact that they talk about things in a passionate, exciting way about, the dramatics of the NBA. And so that is to me one signal of why the quality or the entertainment value of the game is going in a certain direction. I do want to say about Mannix though, like if you listen to the whole clip, I think he's kind of getting at the idea that from the general fan, Denver's boring.
Mm.
And I don't think, like, a lot of people were like, dude, that's your job, is to make people interesting. Everybody has a story, go find it. I think he knows that. Like, he's a professional journalist. I think he knows that. I think what he's saying is that if you're trying to appeal to the general masses, all they want to hear about is the Warriors and Lakers. And that's not new. Like, how much are the Lakers covered on ESPN daytime shows, right? Like, I don't watch them, but I think it's
Oh
more
my
than
God.
most other teams, right? And
Well, I
so,
listen to a lot of podcasts, and I always feel the tension between host slash producer who has like a duty in a sense to talk about the Lakers, and like the everyman NBA writer who's just like, why the fuck are we talking about the
right.
Lakers? They're like 4-18, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a microcosm between, us who'd like to talk about the game itself and the masses, quote unquote, who are interested in it as like, a TV show. Um, and so it's interesting. And so, like, I think Mannix put it terribly, and maybe I'm wrong that I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, regardless, like, you can't say that. But then we had Lisa Salter say that, like, she didn't realize Jokic was this good, and then we had the Mark Jackson thing. Like, there's enough little breadcrumbs here to suggest that the media we rely on to, and that's another problem with the NBA, is that they are just so antiquated in their media space, right? Like, local broadcasts, I venture to say the average age of the broadcasters is 65.
Some of the
Um,
local broadcasts, I just had this thought, like real quick. I was listening to the CBL season opener, Canadian Elite Basketball League,
yeah,
very underfunded league, fifth season, but they have Chuck Swirsky and Joe Rasso doing the call on opening night, and it's a phenomenal broadcast. And I was just like, how much better is this broadcast than the third? Like, how many of the 30 NBA local broadcasts is this better than? I would say like 10. Like
for
some of
sure.
those are garbage. Like
But
just old guys just being like, "You gotta be more physical down there."
it's an innovation paradox that a lot of companies face, which is that, do you rely on your legacy product because that's your moneymaker and that's what your clients want, at the cost of innovating, right? And the NBA
Mhm.
seems to not be innovating at a speed that's fast enough, um, to like catch up with the fact that they are decades behind as far as like the consumer goes, right? Like, if they're catering to the boomer generation, they're definitely going in the wrong direction. And you
For
see
sure.
that most clearly, I think, with the media, right? Like, it happens to be that the TNT is very funny, but it's funny because we're listening to our drunk uncles, not funny because they're like relatable to as like colleagues or peers. And the bad version of that is like ABC's like halftime, where Michael Wilbon, Stephen A, and Jalen Rose say nothing for
Yeah,
45 seconds, you know. And
it's really
so
bad. It's
we're
really bad.
seeing changes with that, with guys like JJ Redick and, I don't know, CJ McCollum and
Well,
a
I was
couple
gonna
of,
say like NBA Countdown, I would say is progressive, like Malika Andrews and
Yeah.
Kendrick Perkins and like Richard Jefferson. Like I do find those guys.
I
I
mean,
actually like that show, and I think
Monica McNutt also is
yeah, and
great.
I think it's pretty different than it was 5 years ago. Like they've gone
Yeah.
young, they've gone hip.
Yeah.
It works.
It's more representative of like who the NBA is and who their viewership is, but it's still very slow, in my opinion. And so, yeah, going back to the Mannix piece, like um, that's just been par for the course for a long time. Mannix is just saying what's been happening
Yeah.
for the last decade. And the interesting thing is, and I think Bill Simmons' podcast brought this up, which is that who is the new face of the league and how is that going to look, right? Like they've been leveraging Curry and LeBron for so
Yes.
long. And I
Okay.
think Giannis and Jokic are more, and Embiid are more than ready to carry the torch. But what's been interesting is that I don't think the NBA or the media has marketed them in the way that they like needed to for it to be like a seamless transition. So it's going to be interesting to see when LeBron and Curry retire how NBA's mainstream media kind of adapts to this new quote unquote foreign, because they're not, none of them are American, like superstar cast of players who are absolutely friggin' phenomenal players, but don't necessarily carry that same like persona, um, that the latter generation did.
Yeah, I'm glad we got here because I kind of forgot, but I knew I wanted to talk about this. And like we've talked about it before, but it's like it's just the Americanization of the NBA. And like they are trying so hard for that next face of the league to be an American, and it's just not there. Like think about how much we hear about Jason Tatum for
Too
the
much.
what 12th best guy in the league. Like what is
Yeah.
Jason Tatum? He's not an elite, like he's
I mean, it's
not that top tier guy.
first team all NBA, but
I don't care. He's not a top 5 player in the league.
I
Like
agree. I agree.
so he's a top like 10. He's around 10.
Yeah.
And yet they push him like he's the next best thing. Whereas like Luka is objectively a better player, Giannis better, Jokic better, Embiid, whatever. Embiid you can actually disagree with. But like we talk about there's no next NBA star to fill for CP and LeBron and Steph. And it's like, no, there are. They're just
Well, for
not
them to
American.
fill. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're just not American, and you're right. For this reason, it perplexes me because, like I said, the NBA has gone global, invested in global growth. But yeah, it's a whole nother step to be like, no, but like our next face of the league is going to be a non-American guy. I kind of believe the league is ready to go there. They don't seem to. Like, I think you can kind of neglect your American audience a bit in favor of like really pushing the game globally by getting behind a Giannis or a Jokic. I don't think Jokic is right just because like he doesn't want that role pretty clearly. He wants to like fuck off in the offseason. But like Giannis or Luka, like those are probably the two big ones. So I actually think the league is ready to go there. The league seems to think that they still need an American superstar to really rally behind, and there's just not one clearly coming through the ranks.
Yeah. That one I'm also confused on too, because they sowed the seeds by going global, by recruiting these global players, by basically tapping into a European league that was elite and drawing talent away from that, going into into Africa and other parts of the world and drawing talent. And then they nurture them to become superstars, and then they're wary to actually use that and leverage that. I mean, there's massive fan base. I can imagine in like these other nations, just if anybody's watching basketball, they're watching these one players.
Like
Um,
all of Europe is behind Luka Doncic. All of Europe. I really feel like if you go throughout Europe and like ask those countries who the number one most popular player is, like I feel like Luka would be high up in a lot
yeah,
of
or
countries
Joker.
because he has connections in Eastern Europe and then he also played in Spain, like whatever. But I feel like when we hear like guys like Chris Mannix talk about how the Denver Nuggets are not compelling, he's talking about to an American audience. And when we're in Canada, so I feel like we're kind of in a weird place. Whereas like, because I was thinking about like, Liban wrote this story. That's what I was thinking about how Jamal Murray and Jokic met each other playing in
Yeah.
like a NBA global, what's it
Yeah.
called? It's like the
Jam.
Nike
Something.
camp.
Yeah.
Nike, whatever, like for prospects. And it's like that's such a great global story that nobody is telling throughout these playoffs. And yet, what do Americans like care about that? Like, I get that point. That doesn't matter to Americans that Jokic and Murray met at this camp and before they ever played together. But it does matter to people in other countries. So that's why I'm just like, we kind of have to separate it in terms of like what American media, like what we target American audiences to talk about, and then what we target like a global audience to talk about. And maybe that's the problem, is like there's no distinction, and maybe there should be a distinction.
For sure. But I still,
Yeah,
no, go ahead, sorry.
no, or we're just doing everything for an American audience, even though there's a lot of people globally listening, and
Well,
that frustrates them.
I still think the global audience is a minority,
Yeah,
right? And so I think like they're kind of, and again, this kind of speaks to my overall thesis. Like I think the NBA just doesn't really have a it doesn't seem like they have a grasp on who or where they want to be going, like who they want to become and where they want to go as far as like an entertainment product in the future. And so that's kind of why I think they're heading for this kind of crisis point. And they'll probably figure it out and it'll probably be fine, but it's like something to be wary about.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. I think to wrap up this point, the question is, can the league keep growing and thriving even if people aren't watching the games on TV? Like,
Right.
that's ultimately the question. I tend to think that it can, because there are just so many revenue sources with sponsorships and social media. Like, there's ways the league can make money through social media, and Top Shop was an example. Like, I tend to just think, and ticket prices are going up. And yeah, that sucks for like accessibility, but it makes a lot of money for the league. So I tend to just think the league is in a good place. I disagree with you about the on-court product. I think it's great. Like, I actually think it's better than
Well, let's go through that
it's
quickly.
been. Well, let's talk about rule changes, because that
Okay.
relates.
Okay. So
I mean,
yeah.
what's your problem with the on-court stuff?
Okay. Well, I think it's like three main things. I think the season's too long, or four
Yeah.
things. I think they've alienated fans, like true fans, true basketball fans. I think the season's too long, the games are too boring, and or the games are too long, and then the games kind of lack excitement within the games. Like, and you can see, and I'm talking more about the regular season, because the playoffs, you see when everybody's bought in, like I haven't been so into a NBA playoffs in a very long time. Like every series was incredible. The intensity was just so high. And I think a problem I would be interested in studying is like how many blowouts there are in the playoffs, because it does seem that like as the playoffs advance, there's more and more just lopsided games. Like games are kind of out of reach coming into the fourth quarter quite often. And I think so. I think that's kind of a
Yeah.
problem, which is another kind of thing
That's
where
fair.
like teams are like, oh, we got blown out. Let's just like conserve our guys till the next game. We're just better off.
I was surprised Miami didn't put Jimmy back in when they were down
Same,
15
same.
yesterday. But I think a big part of that is the three-point shooting. That's why these games are such blowouts, is because
Yeah,
that's
the
just how the
variance.
thing swings.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, I do agree the season's too long. I think 72 games would solve a lot of problems with like guys resting on back-to-backs and stuff like that. It would just eliminate back-to-backs. But I watch more basketball than ever before, and not even for my job, just because I thought this season and the playoffs were amazing. I think the parodies helped. I think the play-in tournaments helped. More teams go for it, and I think in terms of the on-court product, it's just so skilled right now. Um, My main problems come with like stoppages in play
Yes,
and fouls.
that's basically my main one. Too many reviews, challenges, timeouts, too many
Yes.
commercials, too many free throws.
So
Um,
here's a good and a bad. So like Shams reported the NBA is considering giving a technical free throw to a team if someone is called for a flop. That's great and all. I mean, that's okay, but they've said this before and just stopped penalizing flopping like a few weeks into the season. So I don't think that's a big enough rule change. I actually think like if you really want to help defenses, because that's what this league is for, like offensive players are flopping. There are more drastic steps you can take to help defenses, and I think that would help the on-court product. I've talked about it before, but like hand checking, that might be too much, but I think it's something you got to consider.
Adam
Or
Silver just said he wasn't going to. KG interviewed him.
fair. Or instead of the 3 in the key, I want like a 5 in the key or like a no rules in the key like FIBA, like bigs can stay in the key as much as possible because that would help defenses tremendously. Um, they should definitely get rid of flopping. I just don't know if they'll actually like I don't know if you can just put it on the referees without changing a rule and just be like refs penalize flopping more. Do you know? Um
Well,
and then the other rule change, yeah, go ahead.
the larger picture and problem isn't necessarily the rule or lack thereof of the rule. It's the inconsistency of its application, right? And like
Yeah.
the Van Gundys have been on this crusade for a long time, right? Like the flagrant one is a great example. Like one guy, it's a wind up into the head, so it's a flagrant. Another guy, it's a wind up to the head, so it's not a flagrant. Like, you know, we're in an era where we want exactness, exact accuracy to like the finest detail because we've seen it through like automation, digitalization, and inevitably the referees are human error. But I do
Yeah.
think that the NBA needs to work on finding ways to homogenize the application of rules, um, and
Yeah.
adding more rules and adding more calls is a risk because, like you're saying, you're just going to start slowing the game down even further.
Yeah, I don't even think they need to do that. Honestly, I think like given what it is, the NBA is such a hard league to officiate. It's getting faster. I think given what it is, they actually do a good job. Like I watched some of the hockey playoffs this year and talk about a league that has no fucking idea how to officiate its product. Like it's actually a joke. The NBA compared to that is great, and we're never gonna get robot refs. So I think it's actually fun. What I think the NBA should be focused on is eliminating the player complaining aspect of it because
Yeah,
fans only really see the missed call because the player has a fit about it. If
yeah.
players just got back on D like they do in the playoffs, like if you watch the Eastern Conference Finals, guys are getting hacked, they're not getting the call, but for the most part, they know that they just need to get back on defense because the
Well,
other
when they
team is
don't,
running down their throat.
they're suffering for it.
Exactly. So if the NBA found a way to like penalize players more for bitching at refs, I actually think that could help the product a lot.
I agree.
This is the opposite of like the direction we should be going, which is adding a second challenge if the first is successful. Like I'll start off by saying, of course that makes sense
Yes.
fundamentally. If you win your challenge, you should get it back. At the same time, I just don't understand why any NBA fan would want to see 2 challenges times 2. 4 challenges? You want to see 4 challenges in a game? We all know how long they take and how, like, ambiguous they can be even after being watched. I think this is terrible. I think they should get rid of the challenge altogether. I think it's only been bad for the NBA because I've said this so many times, but like because you call a challenge and it's still not clear to the fans. Did he was it a block or was it a charge? It's just giving the refs a second opportunity to view it, but we're still not getting anything clear or consensus. So I hate the challenge. I hate anything that stops the game unnecessarily. Like I was watching again, I was watching hockey the Leafs run, and one thing I love about hockey, and I don't love a lot about it, but you literally get 1 to 2 commercial breaks in a 20-minute period.
Totally. That's totally.
It's great.
They'll have like in-game box stuff, right?
Sure.
And which I think is much better.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
like during a stoppage in play, they'll have like a box, but it
or
won't like
like the
it'll be a
World Cup
short stoppage.
in soccer too, like there's like no commercials. And this is the thing, is that like
Yeah.
those games, it's harder to have commercials because those games are all about this like growing momentum, right? Like, can you imagine the number of commercial timeouts in football, like soccer? It would just be insane, because the possessions grow like organically and slowly over time. And hockey, to some degree, it's back and forth, but it's like there's like a flow. There's no like natural stop to just sort of like timeout, like commercials. And the NBA is more herky jerky, where there's more natural stops. But so many times, the growing, like what we love about a sport is the the thrill or the anxiety, the excitement about a close game. Like, we want a competitive game. We don't want our favorite team to blow out the other team every time. It's just boring, personally. And we get to that point, and then it's like challenge, timeout, commercial timeout. And it's like, and then the last 4 minutes of the fourth quarter take an hour. And it literally just like disembowels any kind of natural emotion that you build up as a fan. And you're just devoid of entertainment altogether. And few other sports have that.
Yeah. All right. I'm about ready to get off this topic and talk
Okay.
a bit about the playoffs if
Okay.
you are.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I don't think we really are going to have time to talk about the Raptors. We can save that for another show, maybe
That's fine.
once they get a coach or something. But NBA playoffs. Let's start in the Western Conference because it's done.
Boring. It's all, there's no storylines.
Well, I mean, real quick, I'll say, like, for me, a lot of it surprised me. A lot of the West, because we haven't talked since the playoffs started. Like, I was surprised the Lakers beat the Warriors. That really, like, kudos to the Lakers. They really had a successful season given where they started. And like, look, okay, let me know what you think about this theory.
Okay.
LeBron, here's what the Lakers were.
Oh, here we are.
80
We're
is your
back to the
defensive
Lakers.
80 is your defensive fulcrum. LeBron is essentially like the best role player in the world until like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. He'll start to take over. But LeBron really in those games was just getting off the ball, playing defense, like organizing, but he wasn't a huge part of the offense. So the Lakers basically got to the conference finals with like Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and
Schroeder.
D'Angelo Russell, the bulk of their offense. So I was like, so is that the way to roster build? Like, just get that stuff, the guard play for cheap, cycle every year, hot and cold shooters, figure out how to play them, and then really like put your main resources into like the defensive fulcrum, obviously, and then like the kind of Swiss Army knife guy who can, but like, I just thought it was like a new way of team building that I hadn't seen before. Because
Yeah,
it shocked me that they had enough offense to get to the Western Conference Finals.
well, what was interesting is it looked like the Warriors didn't have enough offense. And
They
it was
didn't.
just,
They only had
but
Steph.
towards the end, it was just
They only
Curry.
had Steph. Yeah,
Yeah, and
100%.
so to me that's the bigger storyline than it was the Lakers. Like, the Lakers had the depth. Like, I still can't believe Beasley didn't play a minute. Like, I guess he really just isn't as good as we all think he is. But like the Lakers had enough guys to kind of rotate in and out, that if one guy was cold, maybe some other guy was hot. Lonnie
Yeah.
Walker had a game. Rui was hot. Like, I think, to me, the principle I've been picking up on, because I always like to look at the playoffs to see what success is and how we can, how we can extract principles and apply it mostly to the Raptors. But I mean, in every year, it's kind of the same, like, same thesis, which is that you just, at every position, you need a guy who can do something. And it's like, ultimately, when it came down to it, the Warriors had guys that literally just couldn't do anything. Like Clay, if Clay's not shooting, he's nothing.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
Dre can only do so much, he's on the defensive end. And I think for the Lakers, it was like Denver beat the Lakers because they had guys at every position that were better essentially than every Laker at every position,
Yeah.
other than LeBron, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so
Denver's a unique case because they just have the best team in the league, I think,
yeah,
top to bottom.
yeah, but but at every position, guys can do multiple things,
Yes.
and I think that's what's in,
Yeah.
and if we look at the Raptors, like to tie it back to the Raptors, that was kind of what Masai was going for. He's like,
100%.
let's get guys at every position that can do multiple things. The problem was they couldn't do multiple things at an elite level, so like it just
Yeah.
or like it didn't fit together as naturally as they wanted it to.
Well, I think the Nuggets have the best combination in the playoffs of size plus shooting. But like that's kind of why I thought the Lakers were impressive or surprised me. I feel like usually you need to pay a lot for offense. Like usually that's where your resources go is to the guys who can bail you out of situations, make tough shots, whatever. They kind of flipped it on its head and were like, these three like shitty guards, like Reeves isn't shitty, but like really like okay score first guards, we're gonna insulate them defensively and we're just gonna empower them to like shoot the ball and like put them in good positions. And like they literally beat the like yeah, the Warriors had their issues, but they beat the Grizzlies too. Like you
Yeah.
got to give the Lakers credit. They beat two pretty good teams with like this really shittily put together offensive team. And I was just like, Masai has invested so much into like these do it all wings, and he was just like, you're gonna do the scoring, like you're gonna some way through transition, through turnovers, you're gonna score enough. And it's like maybe you actually can just score enough by getting like score first shitty cheap guards and have the wings do all of the other stuff.
Well,
And maybe they'll have a bit more energy to do that stuff too.
I actually think kind of the opposite. I feel like Messiah was like, we're gonna be defensive and we're gonna like kind of like the Lakers, like hope to squeeze out offense, and then our defense was absolute dog shit, and
Yeah, but
so
Masai
like
never got guards, like
that's
one-way
true,
guards.
that's
He
true.
never got one-way players
Well,
who could just score and not anything else.
Gary's probably
Gary,
one
sure.
where,
Yeah,
but
that's true.
I think you're right, but at the core of it, Anthony Davis played some of the most elite
Yeah,
interior or just overall half court defense like we've ever seen
yeah,
for two series, and Memphis had no answer in the post for him,
yeah.
right? And
No, you're
that was a
right.
big thing. Like
That was the biggest thing
they
for
played
their run.
two teams, Memphis and Warriors, who have no interest. Like Memphis is good in the paint when they have Adams and Jackson and
Clark,
Clark
Clark.
Clark.
Yeah.
Um, and the Warriors don't operate in the
He's
paint,
a
right?
West
So
Coast guy, man. Come on.
I know, my bad. Zags. I was just in Spokane actually. Um, and so I think it was a little bit of luck too, as far as like who they played. Because Davis, like
Sure, sure. No,
Davis ran into
I can
Jokic, and
get there.
suddenly he wasn't the all-time defender that they. I mean, he still was very, very good, but
Sure. But my point still stands that like they did build this team in that way and it succeeded. And that did
Mhm.
surprise me because the way LeBron was just getting off the ball and Davis wasn't scoring that much, I was just
Yeah.
shocked that they were able to piece together offense in a way that usually NBA teams can't. But
But then
that's
they got
enough about
swept.
the Lakers. Sorry?
But then they got swept.
Sure. But they got to the Western Conference Finals. Okay,
Yeah.
so
So
that's
did
enough about the
Atlanta.
Lakers. Uh
Okay. Sorry.
the West. Anything else you want to say in the like throughout the Western Conference playoffs that
I think it was the best basketball we had. Like that Kings Warrior series
oh,
was legendary,
you're right.
and
You're right. Yeah.
and I had been a Kings fan all year, so it was fun to watch that. And it's tragic the way they went out. Like they deserved that series. But also it was so cool to see Curry at his prime, like kind of just hero ball to the win. So that was cool. I think Memphis, it's too bad that Adams wasn't healthy. I think like and everything went on with Jaw. Like I thought that series was I think the Lakers lose if Memphis is healthy and all things are normal.
Yeah,
So
same.
I thought that was too bad. Yeah,
No, yeah. Kings Warriors was great. I actually really enjoyed Clippers Phoenix. Like even after
that was
Kawhi went out and
tragic.
it was just rust time, that was
Dude,
phenomenal.
the That was so beautiful. The way
That was
Russ
beautiful to
came back.
watch.
Yeah.
I thought I was right about one thing in this playoffs, and that was that, like, you cannot trade for a superstar, have him play 7 games in the Phoenix Suns case and have no depth and expect to beat a team like Denver. Like, I've been high on Denver all season. I think they were such a criminally underrated 1 seed, and they've just been dominant throughout the whole playoffs. And yeah, credit to them, but, like, the idea that Phoenix was, like, the favorite to come out of the West to me was always silly.
KD just didn't look right. He didn't have that same like aggression that he typically has. I also think they might be, an antithetical to what you were saying with the Lakers because they had a bunch of cheap shooting one-way guards and it didn't work at all for them. Right? Like they had Shamit and Ross and Campaign had a good close of the game.
Yeah, but their offense was coming through KD and Book.
Yeah,
Like, those were the guys fueling their offense.
true.
All right. That's the West. Do you think Denver's going to beat either team that comes out of the East?
100%. They're
Okay.
my only one concern is if you do turn off the taps to Jamal and or Jokic, like is it possible that the other guys aren't as hot as they once were? Like Michael Porter Jr. can't dribble a basketball. It's kind of crazy to watch, but he is a lethal three-point shooter, so it
Yeah.
keeps them alive. But if those guys cool off, like KCP was so hot, Michael
Yeah,
Porter Jr.
definitely.
was like medium. Joker misses a couple of those desperation fadeaway threes. Like a couple of these games probably go a different direction. So, like, I don't think Miami has the personnel to really scheme Denver out of what they want to do. Boston, I think, does. And I think that's the only way you can kind of beat them is like force them to rely more on Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. Because I don't think they like the Lakers just didn't have enough defensively to force that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I actually go in the opposite direction. And I know that Boston has more good defenders and can throw more different looks at you in terms of, like, they can put a smaller guy on Jokic and then have Rob Williams roam off, whatever. But okay, I agree. You want to talk about shutting off the two-man game of Jokic and Murray? The Heat have the best personnel to do that because you put Jimmy on Jamal and Bam on Jokic, and, like, tell me a better duo to defend that two-man game than those two.
Yeah,
That's why I'm like the Heat actually match up kind of well
but
in that sense.
Bam's just too slight against Joker. Like I think like
I
they don't
I
have
don't
no
know.
size on that team, and I
If
think
your offense is
AD
going to
was too
be
slight.
Jokic is going to back down Bam,
No
and
problem.
that's their offense. I don't think that's great offense for the Nuggets.
I think it's just fine. If you
Hmm.
leave Jokic one on one on Bam, he's gonna go to work. I think, and that can
Yeah.
somewhat be said for Horford, but I do think like with Williams off ball, um, yeah, they also don't have a lot of size in reserve. I mean, unless you want to pull out Mike Muscala.
Yeah, Bam, you're right. Like, Bam is not the biggest guy or the strongest guy, but man, he's just such a good defender that I just
Agreed.
kind of trust him to
Agreed.
be in the right, like, places to not let Jokic get, like, the seal early, like, just to fight him for every possession. And Jamal, on the other hand, loves bullying smaller guards. That's like his bread and butter is he gets into his mid-range, sees a couple fadeaways go down, then he starts hitting threes. And, like, you put Jimmy on him, there's just no bullying that can be
Yeah.
done.
Or
So
Martin.
I love the Jimmy matchup on him. I don't think Boston has any defenders who are as good as Jimmy, who they could throw at Jamal, and then
Well, you
and then
probably put
Bam.
Jalen. I think Jalen and Smart would be fine
They're both
against
good, but
Jamal.
they're not Jimmy. They're both good, but they're
Yeah,
not as good as
agreed.
Jimmy
Agreed.
on defense. So that's kind of why I'm just like leaning the Heat. And also the Heat play similar to the Nuggets. They play a lot through Bam, a lot of back cuts, a lot of DHOs. So
Let's
I just kind of want to see that matchup. I just think it would be fascinating and competitive.
let's talk about that. Like another problem I have with the entertainment value of the game has been this general direction towards like pick and roll isolation stuff, which is like pretty boring. But suddenly the two teams that are possibly facing off in the playoffs are the most ball movement, cutting heavy teams. And like, that is so good for the sport. And the same with the Warriors, right? Like the Warriors were so exciting. Even the
Yeah.
Lakers to some degree, even though LeBron liked to be bullied,
Kings.
the bully ball Kings, like a lot of teams that like have passing geniuses as the core of their offense. Even like Curry's passing chops are like incredible in a lot of those games. So that's been a really good boon for the sport generally, is this idea of how basketball is, I think, really supposed to be played when it's played at an elite level.
Yeah. But to that point, you just mentioned like a lot of teams that move the ball. I feel like there
Well,
is a good amount of them, right?
it's
Like,
more so, I'd say.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's a whole
I
nother
mean,
pod. Like the
teams that
ISO
don't:
ball, does it feel
Phoenix,
like
Clippers,
yeah,
Philly, um,
Boston at times, like a lot of times, like
Chicago.
every time they lose, Boston
Yeah,
just ISO.
yeah.
The Raptors. The Raptors. I feel like that's a pretty good place to wrap it, bringing it back full circle to the entertainment value of the game.
Yeah.
Do you have any last thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I spewed it all out.
Do you think the Celtics are going to come back?
I think it's going to go to a game 7.
Yeah. I
I'm
hope the Heat win in 7 in Boston.
Me
That's
too.
just mwah.
Me too. If Lowry plays, like, I don't know if he hurt his hand or something. He hurt his groin too. Like, if Lowry's not healthy and Vincent can't play, like, they're in a world of hurt for ball creation.
Yeah, no, it's pretty unfortunate. We'll see if Tyler Hero comes back at some point. He's apparently shooting.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll try to do a couple more of these pods before the playoffs run out.
Love to.
Yeah, me too. I'm off to a cottage this weekend.
Have fun.
And Adon, any big plans this weekend?
No, I might go to a musical tonight.
What is it?
The Addams Family musical.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Fun. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for all of you listeners / viewers, and we'll catch you another time. And subscribe, like, all that fun stuff. See you later.
Ciao.